Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with the great Scott H. Silverman, who I actually got a question for, but I'm Fredd Carroll. So before we talk to Jessica, who's our guest today, I do have a question for Scott because I was thinking about it as I type Scott H. Silverman 100 times a week into whether I'm producing something or writing a promo. What does the H stand for?
Happy.
It's not Scott. No way your parents saw you born and said, let's name him Happy.
No, I got my grandfather's name, Harris, Scott Harris Silverman. And, it's interesting. I keep the H in my name because a big part of my brand that's been around a long time has H in it, meaning if you Google Scott Silverman, there's a guy in Japan who gets a lot of my stuff. He's emailed me a few times and said, enough. So I try to make sure I have the H in there. So that's what it's for.
Well, Silverman also there's a lot of Silvermans. It's a popular name. Is it true that names were once based off of somewhere in your lineage, somebody was involved in silver, in the silver business or jewelry or anything like that?
No, what have you been smoking, man? No, I don't even know where you get that kind of stuff.
I figured with the last name Carroll, somebody in my family was a singer, a caroler. I don't know. This is where I go.
Fredd, you've got 2 D's in your name, and that's a story in itself, as you know.
2 D's, 2 R's, 2 L's. That's how it is. But our guest today
we're paying her by the hour, so let's get to it.
Well, our guest today has an interesting last name, and I'm not even going to attempt it until she tells me how to pronounce it. So, Jessica, welcome to the show. What's your last name?
Thanks so much. It's Yaffa.
Yaffa.
Yep.
See, that's interesting. I'm sure there's not many Jessica Yaffas. Is Yaffa a popular name?
There are not many of us, no.
That's good. See, you're lucky. So you should have your own podcast and be at it. So you're a friend of Scott's. So Scott's going to kick it in now. Well, first I got to ask Scott how he's doing. I always got to ask Scott how he's doing. How are you, Scott?
I am a little better than I look today, Fredd. It's just, a lot of weird stuff. You and I were talking about car problems. My wife's got car problems this week. But, I attend regular recovery meetings every day, so I get to hear where people are at. And I'm so grateful I have what I have today. And, not that I enjoy the problems I have, but when I see what's going on with people and I watch what's going on with the world, I'm grateful and I'm happy today. And by the way, the reason you're spelling my name over and over again is because you're having difficulty with your computer and losing data. So if you get the right kind of computer, which hopefully once we get a sponsor, we'll get you a new computer and make that happen. But I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, but I'm just going to, we have her bio, people can read it, but a couple of things I want to say about Jessica. First of all, when I reached out to her about joining us, there wasn't even a second's pause. She said, yes. And one thing I know about Jessica is I've never, ever heard her say no. And her compassion for human beings and for helping others is contagious. And she does it with enthusiasm, and she does it with a relentless drive to make sure that she helps people get to where they need to go to get the kind of support that they need. And I love her for that, and I respect her for that. And I've known her a long time, and she's never given up. And I think that speaks volumes, Jessica, to the kind of human being you are, and the 1% club that I like to put people on a pedestal for, because, we're seeing not everyone, but a lot of people today are doing anything they can to try to figure out a way. And I don't think it works for people. It might short term. So I really appreciate and applaud all the great work that you've done. And I'm glad you're here with us today. And she's actually going to be coming to our Society of Addiction Professionals meeting later in July, which I'm excited about. So I get a precursor today. So when I introduce her there, I can formally, embarrass her in person. So today I'm going to be very cautious and mindful. So with that, Jessica, tell us about you, whatever you want to share, and whatever you don't, Fredd will make up. And then tell us about what you do and how you do it and why it's so important, because I don't know how this community would live without you.
Thank you for those super kind and generous words, Scott. I do say no more often these days than ever before, but typically not when I have an opportunity to come together with people that A, I really care about, and B, have an opportunity to share about and have meaningful conversations around things that are really important to me and matter. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Let's see, a bit about me. San Diego native. There aren't a ton of us, but I was born and have been raised in and have lived in San Diego my entire life. I have been in the mental health field for 25-ish years. I have done a variety of things in the world of mental health throughout my career, from direct service support with underserved and marginalized communities through nonprofit work just out of college into private sector work and working in and around the world of treatment. And most recently, probably about 8 years ago, transitioned into my own work where I now have a coaching institute that provides support to individuals, couples, families, organizations around the development and maintaining of healthy relationships and connection. And in addition to that, have had a nonprofit that Scott, you know quite a bit about for the last 11, 12 years that supports survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So I live in both spaces where much of my professional world is now around supporting people, individuals, entities, communities, as we learn how to build connection and live in a place of authenticity and vulnerability and meaning, while also then addressing the needs of those who have not felt safe in relationships and are either in crisis as a result or really needing safe spaces to feel seen, heard, and understood. So that's where I am these days.
Well, when she started, she took my question away from me right away because you said she never says no, and I was going to try to get a loan. So she killed that right away, Scott. Yeah, you started the whole show off with a fib, with a white lie, basically. And I got excited for a moment there. I saw new cars, computers, and stuff in my future. So,
sorry, Fred.
Getting on to that. So you did mention sexual assault. Is that what you said? Sexual assault?
Domestic violence and sexual assault.
So yes. I don't know if you're aware. One of my friends, and she was a guest on this show, Nicole Beverly. I just wanted to make sure people are aware that her movie has come out. Finding Nicole is out on and available. But for you, it's probably a worthy video. It's getting rave reviews. They had their Hollywood, it's big screen, everything. Now it's on all the pay channels and stuff. But it was really done well. And she is she's somebody you probably should connect with, and I'll connect you if you would like with her. She is an advocate. She's out of Detroit area, Michigan, I should say, but I believe it's Detroit. And she survived a brutal, long story short, her ex-husband from prison put a hit on her and her children, and she had to survive that. But obviously there was abuse prior to him going to prison. There's a reason he's in prison. Let's put it that way. But they did a great job. Harvey Wallen, I believe, was the producer. But well, I'm glad you're here today because Scott's always does a good job of bringing in people that are aimed in the same direction as us. Even when they're not, we find a way to aim it. Even last week, we had the woman who was an employment expert, and all we did was aim it towards, okay, people who recovered in addiction, how could they get employed? And it worked very well. She was a great guest. So welcome to the show. Scott, you got a question for her?
Yeah, let's get something clear. When I said she doesn't say no, what I meant was to helping others. You didn't say no to me when I called you about this, and I appreciate the reason you said yes. But that's what I meant is when people contact you and the type of work you do, it's very, I know my daughter, as you know, my Jessica, is a family law attorney and deals with a very similar client from a legal perspective and is one of the few people I've ever met that really, like yourself, loves working with that individual and their family, because there aren't a lot. And when it comes to the legal side, not many people I've heard who talk to other attorneys and go, why would you be in family law? It's so hard, because you have to deal with people. So that's what I meant by the no, so we get clear. So, and my first book is Tell Me No, I Dare You. So I had a workaround. If you had said no, I was going to call your agent and say, we need to get her on the show. And this, by the way, this show will be yours to talk about with others. So tell people, what should people know about Jessica Yaffa? What is it that you do that's kind of unique? And I think it's kind of unique because you're not a lawyer.
Nope.
Correct. And I don't believe you weren't a therapist. I don't know if you got licensed or not, but just as a lived experience person, you bring a lot to the table. And the fact that you're still doing it means that you're probably good at it. And people call you because there isn't a lot of people doing it. I mean, there's the criminal justice side, obviously, and then, of course, the medical side. But still, I think you're kind of in that, opaque area that people really need to know, how to get a hold of you, what to do when they call you, what it is you do that's different, and how you help.
Yeah. Thank you for those questions. I think a couple things really stand out for me. I am not a therapist. I'm not licensed. I have a lot of therapeutic training, and I am a certified coach. So I did go through a very lengthy and very in-depth coaching program many years ago, and now actually certify other coaches to become relationship coaches specifically. So I am a certified relationship coach with all sorts of different trauma training, and yet really decided to go the coaching route rather than the therapy route for some of the reasons that you just identified. It was really important to me as I continued in my career to be able to share about my own personal experiences and to show up from a place of authenticity and vulnerability if I were going to be asking others to do the same. And while therapy has been an incredibly important part of my ongoing healing, really felt like there were constraints around and ethical guidelines around what that part of me could and couldn't look like as a therapist, that when I decided to go back to school many years ago, was really clear that I wanted to go a route where I would have an abundance of training, but also get to acknowledge that what makes me an expert is not the books I've read or the number of hours that I've studied. It's really my own journey. And so while the education has absolutely supported me in my work, I am very open and transparent when it's appropriate about my own journey and how that has not only been at sort of the forefront of all of the work that I do, but very much shapes the way that I show up with others. So with that, I would say that because I'm sort of living in these two places, I want to kind of clarify the kind of support that's offered in each place so that anyone that's listening that might need support is really clear about the breadth of support that I'm committed to offering. The Coaching Institute launched about 6 years ago with the intention that I spend a lot of my professional life and career really focusing on the development and maintaining of healthy connection. To be in the world of relationship abuse or relational trauma day in and day out is exhausting. It can feel really defeating. And ultimately, we're just putting a Band-Aid on something that is continuing to be a public health epidemic. And so it's important to me that I be in that space. And my nonprofit, which is completely volunteer run, continues to be committed to showing up in the most fragile and scary spaces in individuals and families' lives. And yet I also felt very compelled to create a space and find ways to get on the front end of this thing and be in work that is promoting healthy connection, intentional connection, constructive conflict, navigating hard or challenging relational dynamics in ways that feel healthy and connected and breed intimacy. And so the Coaching Institute works with individuals, couples, families, and organizations around the development of healthy connection. The nonprofit supports those who are struggling as a result of relational abuse. And so we really have strategically created a continuum that allows those who are wanting and or needing support from the inside out in the ways in which they are showing up in relationship and in the ways in which relationship has shown up for them to feel seen, heard, and understood, no matter kind of where they are on their journey.
So is there a way to kind of simplify, or I want the word that comes to my head is pigeonhole, but not the people that come to you to want to learn. Yeah. Is there a kind of a profile that you've been able to kind of identify the type of person and why they've come to you and maybe even how they found you?
Yeah. So the Coaching Institute really focuses on working mostly with individuals and couples who, for whom there is no relational abuse that is contributing to wherever they're feeling stuck. It's really about relationships where people are identifying either we've been to traditional therapy and that's not been super successful for us. We feel like we want to be doing more solution-oriented work, and coaching is really about sort of tangible, tool-based, action-oriented work that allows people to practice new ways of being in relationship. So the folks who find the Institute are usually looking for tangible tools that they can utilize when hard conversations arise. They feel like they've maybe lost connection and are looking to rebuild connection or intimacy. Maybe they've just gone through a breakup or preparing to get married and want to do some work on self and or as a couple in order to ensure that they're really thriving in certain areas that can become stagnant or stuck, those sorts of things. So I would say that the Institute is really about supporting those who have a high level of motivation, who recognize that there are areas of their lives or relationships where they feel out of alignment or feeling a bit stuck or disconnected or are going through a transitional period that's really impacting the ways in which they're experiencing themselves in their relationships, and yet they're not necessarily in crisis.
So do you do a lot of corporate work? Because when you talk about, because I believe life is all about relationships. And it's interesting that people have either been through a catastrophic event or people have had a really negative experience. They've shut down, or the tools that they used to use, they don't trust themselves or they don't trust others. So they end up getting stuck, and I love that concept, pressure bust pipes, and then they internalize. And what happens is, bad things happen to them, and they were the victim, if you will, or they were the ones who are the subject to, the abuse that takes place when you're unable to either stand your ground, speak your ground, or stand up for yourself, or even know that what's going on potentially is paralyzing you. So yes. Are you able to take that into the workplace as well?
Absolutely. I have many organizations, and in fact, many college campuses, private organizations, government organizations who have brought in workshops in addition to one-on-one coaching around constructive conflict, how to navigate hard conversations, how to motivate people from a place of learning who they are and really investing in kind of the whole person and how that directly positively impacts the organization, bottom line, et cetera. So yes, more and more leaders are becoming aware of how important it is to have this kind of work, not just available to their people, but also available to themselves and their leadership teams in order to really build organizations that are intentionally committing to their people feeling seen, heard, and valued, which ultimately has everything to do with then how long they stay, how motivated they are in their work, et cetera. Yeah.
So what are some of the more common things that you see that are repetitive in whether it's from the abuse side or in any of what you do? Is there one specific thing or two specific things?
Yeah, I would say on the Coaching Institute side isn't the abuse side. It's usually a couple of things. Either I'm focused on what the other person is or isn't doing that is contributing to my negative experience of this relationship, rather than being able to focus on how I'm contributing to the pattern or I'm contributing to the dynamic. And so we do a lot of work to really support each person in identifying individual opportunity for change rather than looking to the other person to change. And then I'd say second is just sort of acknowledging the pressures of life and how what's happening in our world, in addition to what happens when we're parenting young children, when someone loses their job, when we move from not living together to living together, and how those pressures can contribute to feelings of disconnection, feeling misunderstood, feeling alone, et cetera. And so we often are working with people who are in transitional spaces as well, because those transitions do directly impact not just how they're experiencing themselves, but one another. And then I'd say with the nonprofit, when we're talking about domestic violence, I mean, every scenario is unique, right? But domestic violence is all about power and control. And so there is always some component of a person or a family system being in a pattern where they have been made to feel and believe that they are powerless, helpless, unlovable, stupid, stuck, etc. And so that shows up over and over again. And it's really about supporting them and beginning to identify that A, that story isn't true, and that B, there are other stories that are more true and that are actually possible for them. So that's sort of one component that shows up all the time. And then I would say the second being that we're still, as a society, really working through so much of the stigma around relationship abuse. And so often survivors will come either feeling undeserving of support or minimizing the situations that they're in. It's not that bad. I've not been physically struck, or it's not as bad as my neighbor across the street. And so there's a lot of minimization that happens, which is also a survival mechanism. And there's a lot of manipulation and coercion that often happens as a part of that power and control dynamic. And so survivors believing that they are never going to find anyone else that is going to love them, care for them, support them, et cetera, is certainly sort of underneath some of those beliefs that contribute to why there's so much stuckness or why they are feeling so alone and or hopeless.
Yeah, I recently, without getting into too much detail, had a instance where a friend of somebody I was friendly with started dating a gentleman or a guy, and somehow he was a very jealous man. And I guess he saw my phone number in her phone, even though we weren't connected that way. It was truly just platonic friendship. And he decided to start calling me, so eventually I realized, wait, something's wrong here, because he was FaceTiming me and stuff. So I instantly jumped into action and went to the police and stuff, and they did a welfare check, and he was actually arrested for something else. The problem is, as soon as that court order was over, they were already back together. And she was already calling me and killing our friendship through it. And you kind of get to a point where I was putting myself in danger to help her. Mm-hmm. And when, I don't know if I'm right or I'm wrong, I don't know if there is a right or wrong, I stepped away from the whole thing to save myself rather than, because I figured I already gave you the rope to get away, and you chose to, I guess, hang yourself with it rather than go away. And boy, is that a defeating feeling, but you have to, I don't want to be looking over my shoulder either.
Yeah. Yeah. You are not alone in that experience, Fred. It is really confusing and scary and defeating for friends and family who are witnessing someone that they love and care about choosing what feels like such an obviously destructive or unsafe relationship. And there are a lot of reasons in which this is so complicated and complex. One thing that is important to recognize is that when any of us, no matter how smart we are, how educated we are, where we come from, what we look like, our cultural background, when we have two options in relationship, one being unhealthy connection and the other being no connection, we are all landing in unhealthy connection every day of the week. And so until someone like your friend actually believes that they are deserving of healthy connection and that healthy connection is available to them and that they are worthy of that connection, they are going to continue to remain either in the same relationship or continue to choose relationships where similar patterns exist. And that's a part of our wiring, part of our DNA is to be in connection with others in order to survive. And while it doesn't make sense on the outside, because for many of us, it feels so obvious, something else is available. If we've ingested messages throughout our life that contribute to these beliefs that I am not lovable, or that I am only lovable when I perform in a certain way, and that if I don't perform well, I become undeserving of love, or I become deserving of punishment, or that when something terrible happens in my relationship, I am to blame. When our brain begins to ingest those messages as truth, we can't actually see any other story as being available to us. And so your support is like a mustard seed in the healthy connection bucket, right? And we don't know how many of those seeds are going to need to be planted before your friend is able to recognize that something else is available to her. But when we've often lived a lifetime of ingesting messages that are contributing to that unhealthy bucket, it's going to take a lot more than one person in one moment supporting us in choosing something different in order to actually be able to break through some of those patterns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It's something Scott deals with, I'm sure, a lot.
Yep.
In a similar sense with the addicts. Basically, until they were willing to accept it and help themselves, it's almost impossible to get them help until they do.
Yeah. And the family part, and I've been dealing with people who suffer from addiction for a long time, but what's happened, and especially since COVID, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Jessica, that the family unit has really started to, I'm seeing more of them asking for help. And then when I hear a mother say, I've had difficulty with my son for a long time. And I said, when did it start? When he was, about 18 or 19. And so how long's it been going on? And, he's like 57. So mom has been held hostage, and she may be a single parent at this point because things have happened with the family. And that relationship has been crippled or disabled or disconnected, but he won't leave the house. She can't ask him to. She's afraid to, or doesn't want to see him become homeless, but yet it continues. And, she's hiding in her room or she's searching his room when he leaves the house, if he ever does. And I'm seeing more and more of that than I've ever seen before with that relationship and the family. So, we'll talk more offline about how, I might be able to get some referrals coming your way as well. Because that's not really my job, is to kind of put out the fire as a crisis coach and let them, give them an opportunity to have permission to go, you mean I don't have to do this? No.
Yes.
And I like the way you frame it with unhealthy versus not healthy, or none. So, you get one of the options, just like in addiction, jails, institutions, or death or sobriety. You get a choice, and you always get a choice.
It's a big stigma there, Scott, that you may not be aware of in the abuse culture. And I'm only aware because I do have a gay son, how we view two gay men in a physical relationship. We tend to look at it as, well, it's two guys, almost like it's fair. It's not a guy on a woman. It's a guy on a guy fighting. But it is brutal when somebody is involved in that, and only because of the strength that's involved in that. Usually, I don't know how to word this the proper way, and somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But, usually it's not two strong people, even if it's two males. One of them is usually a little softer or gentler in the relationship, and the abuse. When I tell you, when you see it or are involved in it, and I go back years with this, but I've seen it not only in my son's relationships, I'm talking in his friends of friends, but it's a stigma. We do not view it. We don't look at it and think of it as abuse.
Yeah, you're spot on, Fred. And in fact, all sorts of statistics around everything that you're speaking to, the prevalence of it in the prevalent domestic violence and same-sex relationships is high, 2 and 5. And with that, we also know that things tend to be, and this is a generalization, and yet statistically speaking, things tend to be more serious in nature before there is a reaching out for help, because often there is so much else that the individuals that are participating in the relationships are grappling with, right? I've just come out to my family and they're finally accepting me. And now I'm going to tell them that I'm in an abusive relationship, or my family doesn't accept me. And therefore I am completely alone and totally isolated and only have this person that I can rely on. Or I've been threatened that if I tell anyone about what's going on in my relationship, my partner is going to out me, right? So all sorts of complexities that contribute to how and why it's awful no matter, right? And there's a ton of complexity around relationship abuse, no matter the dynamic and the specific dynamic in the relationship. And we do know that there are extra complexities when it comes to same-sex relationships or non-heterosexual relationships.
Yeah. So this is all very interesting. But what I want to know is what you do outside of this to enjoy your life. What are some of the things that Jessica does that aren't involved in this that you enjoy?
Yeah. I love being outside. So anything outdoors.
You're not going to brag about living in San Diego, are you?
I mean, we complain when it's like below 65 or above 83, right? So yeah, it's a good place to be, especially for someone who likes to be outside as much as I do. We have a 2-year-old Aussie Doodle. So we were not big dog people before her, and now we're totally obsessed. So all about her and getting her outside. I am definitely, I feel very fortunate in having a group of friends that I feel super connected to and also really hold me accountable. So I get text messages or phone calls when they are not hearing from me regularly, and they say, "What the hell are you doing? You're obviously out of balance right now. We're coming to get you for coffee," or "It's been 3 weeks since we've seen you and we're taking you to dinner on Saturday." So they do a beautiful job of helping me to continue to maintain some of that balance. And I'm a big foodie. So all about trying out new spots, love to travel and experience new foods, also really about coffee. So always down to try some of the new coffee spots in town. I feel like I, these days, do a much better job of maintaining some sense of balance for myself than I did in the earlier years of doing this work.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Well, I'm stuck in Connecticut, and the difference in temperature, Scott always finds a way. He claims he doesn't rub it in, but I try to explain just him appearing on my screen is a rub in usually, because I could see the reflection of the sunlight off his face. You know, he gets to look at the Pacific Ocean. I get to look at the Atlantic Ocean. They're two completely different oceans, obviously, but mine has weather patterns coming over it with hurricanes and stuff like that. It's annoying. It's a nuisance. You San Diegoans are a nuisance to me.
Yeah, fair.
So luckily I control the edit and the production of this video, so I could kind of spin it that way. But Scott's got one magic question. I know he's just brewing. He's waiting to hit you with this, and we're gonna test you. Last week's guest broke the record for quickest answer.
Oh man!
But
all right.
Scott's gonna test you. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, thanks, Fred. By the way, I think it's 72 degrees today. It's very nice, sunny. You can see the sun on my face here. So the question I have, Jessica, which Fred doesn't like me to ask, but it's in my contract now. He has to let me. What is it we have not asked you that we should?
Maybe as a family member, friend, or loved one of someone who is experiencing or has experienced relational abuse, what is like the quote unquote right way to show up? How can we be supportive of the people in our lives who are going through or have gone through the kinds of things that we're talking about today? Because we do feel so powerless, and it does feel so big and confusing and scary. So that's a big one. And it comes up often with people that I work with. And I would say that at the crux of relationship abuse is there are a number of things, but one of the things that tends to happen is isolation. And there are all of these ingested beliefs about my being bad, my being wrong, my not being worthy of love, connection, etc. And there being conditions around the ways in which I earn that love. And so if we as loved ones can continue to, as hard as it can be in certain moments, emphasize, I see your worth, I see your value, and I love you, no matter what you choose to do in this relationship. Or I may not understand this relationship, and yet I want you to know that I'm here to support you. I may feel scared or confused or frustrated by what is happening in your relationship. And I want you to know that it doesn't change the fact that I value our relationship so much. And that if and when at any point you decide that you would like some support, I'm here. And yet it's not based on, our relationship is not based on conditions around what you decide or don't decide to do, because there's so much expectation already. We're judging ourselves every day as survivors. Our partner is certainly placing a tremendous amount of judgment. The world around us is judging us. And so if we have a person or a few people who are really offering these messages of unconditional regard, this is so hard, and yet still it changes nothing about how much I love you, how much I care for you, that you are worthy of connection, etc. And I am here unconditionally to support you, whether you change your mind, whether you make the decision that I might understand or agree with or not. It is the way in which we continue to drop those seeds into the healthy connection bucket and start to build a new story for the people that we're in relationship with.
Oh, I'm going to have to match last week's answer to this week's answer and get the timer out. She was pretty close there, I think, Scott. You're getting better at this. This is getting, that was quick. It was concise. It was beautiful. But I want to thank you. Do you have any connections, like website or anything people could go to research this, or you?
Yeah. So 2 different websites. The nonprofit, which is for domestic violence crisis and support, is Speaking Out NSNV, for No Silence, No Violence. So that's speakingoutnsnv.org. And the Coaching Institute, which is about the promotion of healthy relationships and building and maintaining healthy connection, is jessicayaffa.org.
Excellent. Scott, you got anything to add?
No, I just, it's good to see you. It's good to hear from you. And I'm really impressed with how you've really taken your message, I think, to a whole new level. So thanks for being with us today.
You bet.
Why don't you give your phone number out, Scott?
I will. 619-993-2738. And please give us a call. 619-993-2738. If I can't help you, I'll find someone who can.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Jessica for coming on. You're a beautiful human being. Even you, Scott, you're a beautiful human being also. I don't tell Scott that enough. It's, I see him so often and stuff, we're going to hang out and go smoke cigars together one day. And, I'm going to come to San Diego apparently, because Scott never leaves the house, and we're going to have fun one day. One day, Scott, I'll get there. I'll see you, buddy. But I'm Fredd Carroll. You're Scott H. Silverman. This is your crisis coach. And if no one has told you they love you, we love you. And we will talk to you again next week.